We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Valentine's Day edition of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Also reminded that today is February 14th, which is also Founders Day in the African Methodist Episcopal Church tradition. The African Methodist Episcopal Church is a faith tradition, a denomination rooted in social justice. It's noted as the first act of civil disobedience in the country between black and white people. It is the oldest black denomination in our country. And there is an AME church here in Carlisle at 131 East Pomfret Street. Bethel is a part of that tradition, so we just honor them and hold space for them today. And happy Founders Day. Happy birthday, Frederick Douglass. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Before we get started, I will entertain a motion to permit Mr. Waterbuck to join us via Zoom.
I so move.
Is there a second?
I second.
It's been properly moved in second. I'll call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it. We will proceed. Welcome, Commissioner Waterbuck. How are you? Uh-oh.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. All good.
Outstanding. Glad to be here.
Go Commanders.
We'll see.
All
It's
right.
not going over very well here in DC.
Yeah, I can imagine. All right, we'll go ahead and get started with our discussion items. First up is a report from the Research Working Group.
I thought the first item was the approval of the minutes.
I think you're right. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Also move a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Commissioner Razanauskas moved. Commissioner Donaldson second. I'll call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion is carried. Now, can we do the discussion items? All right, Research Working Group.
Yes, so I will start the conversation and then the other members of the working group can kind of jump in as needed. So the main things to report are that the Research Working Group kind of met with various constituents. We met with the police chief, well, not just our group, but we did organize the chief conversation. What I want to report from that is that we had a very spirited conversation. Commissioner Wilbur, Tristan, you came as well, that's right. And myself, we spoke with the chief quite a bit. We learned a lot about data collection policies that I think will be really helpful for us as we consider possible recommendations to Borough Council later when we actually issue our report. I think that's all I feel like saying about that. Do you want to jump in and say more, Tristan, about your experience?
Not too much, just that I think it was a good conversation, and just from a local and community standpoint that I generally focus on, I thought I learned quite a bit too, aside from just kind of statistical things.
Yeah, so that was that. One of our members was also able to meet with the Carlisle Area Chamber of Commerce. Lou, would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, certainly. Thank you. I met twice with the Carlisle Area Chamber of Commerce with Michelle Crowley. She's the president and CEO, as well as the Chamber's Diversity, Equity, and Exclusion Committee. There was also a guest at one of the meetings by the name of Deborah D. Vereen. She runs a group called the Vereen Group, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. First, Emily asked me to initiate a collaboration with the chamber to see if they could help us from the economic perspective. Clearly, we need some actionable metrics to work with if we're going to be recommending any sorts of policies or changes in policies and the like. So the chamber agreed to meet with me. They've also agreed to, following our discussions, to continue to collaborate with the TRC to help us make some meaningful progress. To the extent necessary, they're willing to collaborate with us. There are some 700 business members in the chamber, so most of my both of my meetings were sort of fact-finding and level-setting, if you will. So they kind of understood what the TRC was all about, what our goals are, and the like. And so they shared some information with me, which I passed in a readout to the research group the week of that meeting. And then I passed, I think, on yesterday to the larger TRC, the same readout. Let me just hit some of the highlights. Michelle Crowley, she was very forthcoming and upfront, and frankly, she revealed that really before the year 2000, the chamber didn't believe there was a problem or any challenges with regard to race in the Carlisle area. The wake-up call was when the KKK visited on September 23rd, 2000, visited the square. At that point, there was a common belief in the chamber that there definitely is a problem and challenges in the Carlisle area. The chamber aims to use what they call the Tulsa Model for running their chamber in terms of DEI best practices. That is diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Tulsa Model was born out of the race riots that occurred in 1921 in Tulsa on Black Wall Street. Many of us know that story. The idea was to resurrect or regrow the Black business district after it was destroyed in 1921. So the Tulsa Model also requires that a number of metrics be used to determine whether or not progress is being made in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion with respect to Blacks. So they're aiming to use that model. Again, as I said, she was quite upfront. She said some of the other models and other projects that they've initiated were essentially designed for big cities like Philadelphia, for example. She said they did not work and do not work in the borough for various reasons. So they're still sort of trying to get their legs up under them, but they think the Tulsa Model will help. The chamber is going to share with the TRC business metrics, but they revealed that their business metrics have not been updated since the start of the pandemic. So we agreed that they would share those with us at a later time. However, the chamber collectively believes that there are at least a dozen Black or minority-owned businesses that fall under the Carlisle Area Chamber of Commerce. They also pointed out that there was a Patriot News article rather recently that incorrectly said that there were only two. And so I know that they're still smarting over that. And so they're really working to get some good metrics for us for small and medium-sized minority businesses. Let me share just a little more. They agree that collectively that there's a significant African-American population in the borough that operates in an untaxed and unregulated economy as well. And we talked about that in the research group, in our research group meetings, sort of an underground kind of or unregulated economy. And there are various hurdles that we believe are the reason why that happens. That is, why aren't these young entrepreneurs engaging the chamber? And so they find that as one of the big challenges with their particular engagement, the largest being the securing of loans, business loans, small business loans. Extremely difficult for the African-American community in the Carlisle area because they run about a 7 to 8% interest because they are considered to be high risk. Average interest is about 2.54, 3.5 for central Pennsylvania. Statewide, it can get up to 7%, but invariably, this is a problem that she is well aware of and wants to seek solutions to. There was also, as I said, a member, a guest, along with myself and Deborah Vereen. The chamber wants to formalize diversity, equity, and inclusion training. It is their belief that these terms are used in a way where folks are not necessarily thinking or believing the same thing. And so they want to level set on terms of reference. And we went back and forth, and people had various ideas of what they meant, what this DEI actually means. Several businesses were in attendance, Giant Foods, for example, and there were others. And all of these businesses have some sort of committee or some sort of initiative to ensure a fair treatment of African Americans, women, veterans, and the like. But they all agreed that there was really nothing pulling them all together, so they were pulling in the same direction. And they were hoping that perhaps the borough, the TRC, might routinize some sort of engagement with them that would help kind of bring everything together. So I sort of agreed that, yes, at least for the duration of our study, of our work, that we would help in that regard. So I will be invited to future meetings. And let me see if there's anything else at this point. I want to guess underscore the need for compelling and actionable metrics for our report to borough officials. And this just lines directly with what the chamber is also seeking, so they can determine whether or not they are making progress in these these areas. So I believe that Deborah Vereen is going to set them up with some formalized training. She is a professional in this particular area, and there was although they walked this back, there was a offer by the chamber to offer or to extend this training to either the TRC or to the wider borough council, but then that was walked back because I was a guest in their meeting and it had not been previously discussed with members of the chamber. But there's a general belief that there needs to be some formalized training in order to advance these kinds of initiatives and make real progress with actionable metrics. So without repeating all that I said, if you have my report, you can look at it. I thought one particular metric was sort of a standout. Now, this doesn't apply specifically to the Carlisle Borough because those metrics are still being compiled. But for Pennsylvania writ large, Ms. Vereen offered there are 131,512 Black-owned businesses as of 2021 and 818,000 non-minority-owned businesses. We think that that is a major problem. And that's something that she seeks to work with the Commonwealth on writ large to try to bring that into more balance. I hope in the future to have similar metrics for the Carlisle area. And then we'll really know where we stand and where we can be the most helpful. So if there are no questions, that is essentially for those two meetings, that was sort of the readout.
Thanks, Lou. Are there any questions about that before we maybe talk about the last item?
When you say the Tulsa model, is it? I took that to mean that it was like a model that's used other places. Is that?
Yes, the Tulsa model was formalized by Tulsa and was approved by a number of scholars who put together a series of actually fairly rigorous metrics to hold the city to with respect to making progress for Black entrepreneurs. It is, I don't want to say it's overkill for the Carlisle area, but even Tulsa, if you've ever visited Tulsa, Tulsa is another one of those huge areas. Remember, Emily was talking about having a sort of a peer aspirant for Carlisle, and that's part of what we're doing in the research group is to look for some peer aspirants. Tulsa is actually not a good one for a number of reasons. Nevertheless, the model, however, is focused on very specific, measurable information that has to be acquired and curated over time to show that progress is being made. It also informs where resources can go or should be placed, where resources can be shifted if they're ready to be shifted, in order to get the more of the diversity and equity and inclusion and not have those imbalances. Again, the imbalance that we're talking about in Tulsa was a direct result of the destruction of Black Wall Street. So again, we're still talking about a very large undertaking compared to what we have in the borough. But Michelle and her group at the chamber believe that they can scale that model, that it is scalable to any size community. And from what I've read, that is correct. We would just have to determine which metrics that we can regularly report on, apply to Carlisle, and a regular report would be put out. Not to get ahead of the discussion, but I did discuss with Emily and the chamber the possibility of, in their own annual report, which their annual report really focuses on, these are the great businesses in Carlisle, these are the great opportunities, if you need this, contact this business. They discussed but did not decide on whether or not some of these metrics, once they were established and measured, that they would also be part of an annual report, which would then allow us to do trend analysis and actually show the community that where the effort is being made and show either the progress or lack of it. But she didn't. She couldn't agree to that at the meetings that I attended. But it is something that we're certainly thinking about doing. It increases the transparency. It shows that we're really trying to do something. And frankly, it puts us on the hook. It basically says, okay, we're going to track this, and we don't think that this particular metric is very good. There are not enough Black-owned and minority-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses, small, medium size, and the like. They're not getting the business loans. What are we doing to incentivize that? And are we making any progress? And is that clear?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I'm talking about the model itself.
The model is a scholarly model,
right,
of an academic nature.
Yeah, okay. Is there a link to that model in your report?
No.
Okay. Is there any place?
In the report that we submit after we speak in the research group, if the chamber does indeed opt to actually formalize that, I think it would be useful. What I don't want to do is to get ahead. What Emily shared, and it's exactly right, is even that model, even though it is very rigorous in data, it does not easily apply to the Carlisle area. So there may have to be some changes that they would like to make to it, even though keeping the foundation of a model. But that is their current goal.
Understood.
And again, that model can be it's all over the internet, and certainly links to it can be provided in our report from the research group.
Right. Yeah. So I'm Googling it now, and I'm not able to locate it.
Yeah. You go. I've been to it and have read a lot of it. It is pithy. But if you go to the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce, they have a contractor that does it for them. The name escapes me right now. Then you have to follow the cookie crumbs to that contractor. That contractor then reveals, since it is a monetary contract, they pay for it, and it's proprietary data. They show the basic outlines of the metrics that are being used, and you can track and go through that. Like I say, it's quite extensive. I've gone through maybe 25% of it.
So my question is the actual model itself. So I'm on the Tulsa Chamber site and I see Tulsa's future, and I see 4 pillars of growth. So I'm looking at this. Is this what is being called the Tulsa model?
No.
Okay.
In order to see the actual data for Tulsa, one has to be a member of the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce
To see the model.
to see the application of the model, since it is proprietary data.
Understood. Is there any way that we can see the model?
I believe I can send the link. I can track it again to the basic outline of the model that's being prepared, that's used by a contractor. They do not reveal all the data because, again, it is proprietary. And this is one of the issues that that Michelle has, is she's only able to see certain portions of it because, again, she's not a member of the chamber at Tulsa. But I can certainly send the link to the contractor that is running that model for Tulsa.
Yeah, but I'm not after any proprietary information, but the metrics wouldn't be proprietary, would they?
The metrics are proprietary. Yes, they are. The whole methodology is proprietary. There is a basic outline because that I have read that shows the basics. And she calls it the Tulsa model. It's actually called a different name by the contractor. She calls it Tulsa, and I think so do other cities, because Tulsa is the first to initiate it. I believe they received a grant to come up with this, but it was tailored for Tulsa.
Okay.
Can be a little complex, but the
Well, no,
upshot
it's not complex. I'm
it
on.
can be. I believe it can be, and let me tell you why. If you're going to initiate a model, which is the reason why the chamber has not made a lot of progress, if you're going to initiate a model, you have to have metrics that are diagnostic for your own particular area, Carlisle versus Tulsa. So I believe what Tulsa did is they provided their metrics to a contractor. A contractor then developed a model based on those metrics. We are not doing that at the Carlisle Area Chamber of Commerce. What they are doing is looking and reading the cookie crumbs and saying, yeah, we need something like that. That is, we need metrics that are diagnostic for the Carlisle area. That is almost the extent of the chamber's attempt to use the model. But they understand that this is the area to go. This is the way to do it. Whether you use a Tulsa model or you use something else.
I understand.
Is that clear?
I understand.
Great.
So I'm on the Tulsa Chamber website. There's a part.
I'm not there right now, so
Can I finish? There's a portion. There's a portion on their website that says Tulsa's future has identified. This is their chamber. Tulsa's future has identified regional metrics for the 4 pillars of growth: prosperous future, skilled future, innovative future, livable future. So you're saying what you are speaking to is none of this?
No, I'm not saying that, because the chamber is using that model. Yes. So no, I am not saying that.
So this is what they're using then?
That is the outward face of what they're presenting.
Okay. So then my question is, this does not speak to race. So if their reason
is not the model. That's correct.
Okay, I'm ready for the next item unless anybody has any questions.
Good. I think it's probably worth us revisiting the issue probably when we have got a little bit more time set aside for it, since we're just supposed to have an update. The last item, I think, unless there's anything else, is an update about the speaker that we've invited, Colleen Murphy. So Just the timeline of events. At the last meeting, at the December meeting, I brought up that we said that we were going to invite speakers, asked that we should move forward with that. This was kicked to, we agreed to that. This was kicked to the research group. The research group identified a speaker, Colleen Murphy, who is a truth and reconciliation expert. At the January meeting, I brought up again, should we actually get this speaker? We said yes. I recall after that, Lou asked kind of why are we having speakers, because that conversation about having speakers was a conversation we had before Lou joined us. We recalled the reasons why we have speakers. And then the day after our meeting, I wrote to Professor Murphy, extended an offer to come out to Carlisle at some point in the spring. She got back about 2 days later saying, yes, she'd be happy to do so, and gave us a range of possible dates. And what we haven't done is chosen one of those dates. And so that's kind of where we are with that. We should select a date and then kind of move forward. So that's where we are with that process. And one thought I had is that if we do decide that the earlier dates that Professor Mercier has given us, which is about 2 weeks from now, or 2.5 weeks from now, if that's too soon, her next dates that she's mentioned, at least as of now, are in May. And I think there's an open question about whether we should wait to have an event of that kind until May, or whether we ought to look for an alternative speaker, at least as a first thing, given that the group's set to expire in just 9 months. So that's that. So since I took the lead on that, I'm happy to entertain any questions about that.
Raf, just a quick question. Forgive me if we've hit this already. Would the audience just be the commission, or are you thinking more of a broader community?
Right. So the idea was that there would be two different functions that having truth and reconciliation experts would have. One would be something public facing, a public facing conversation, a speech, or something of the sort. And she mentioned that she's done work of this sort before, addressing communities that are trying to bring about truth and reconciliation in their communities. But then also, because she's kind of done more tactical work with commissions, that there would be a dinner or something of this sort with the commission, during which time we can learn more about how her expertise can be of use to us. So that was the idea behind having such an expert come to our community.
So just so that I have a little bit more better understanding of the timeline that you're suggesting, I'm looking at October's minutes. Is that the meeting that you were referring to?
We've talked about speakers at maybe 3 or 4 of our past meetings. So the most recent meeting where we had a conversation about having this speaker in particular was in January. So
at our last meeting.
Yes, at our last meeting. That's why I booked the speaker after asking should I book the speaker the next day.
I guess just behind my question, so part of my answer, I'm thinking if we are thinking of a broader audience and some education of the community at large, it may make sense to wait. Something of that magnitude just may require some, or just might be in our best interest to garner more attention. But if the audience was just us, I would make more of a case for the earlier. And I'm not fully opposed to the earlier. I think we could still do that because I am respectful of the longevity of our term. But I think that might benefit us if we might.
So I'm looking. I don't see any mention of speakers at the January meeting in the minutes. But I do see in October that Mr. Donaldson suggested that the research working group recommend speakers to community engagement group who would then plan the event. I recall the name being mentioned, but if we're engaging someone, we would have had to vote.
So I think that there are two questions here. So one is, what's the proper memory of what happened before? And then there's another question about like, what are we actually doing with this particular event? And it's hard for us to have both of these conversations at the same time. So if we want to have the conversation about what happened before, my understanding is that we did have a conversation. I specifically asked, should we do this? And then I specifically sent emails saying that we were doing this, and everyone else had the understanding that we were moving along. The first objection that we heard to this was over 2 weeks after I said that we had booked the speaker. So everyone else's memory of the events is as I recall them. But excuse me, let me finish.
That was a little attacky.
Well, the point of the matter is, everyone else is on. Excuse me, please let me finish.
The point of the matter, Raph, the point of the matter is we would not have obligated funds that we did not even know that we had received prior to the January meeting.
Am I allowed to talk now? Thank you. We knew that we had received the funds, and the actual amount of the funds was mentioned during the January meeting. Again, if you do not recall this, I do apologize, but it did happen. And moreover, again, we don't have to have an argument about what actually happened in the past. We can just vote again. We can have the conversation again. Should we have the speaker? And then once we decide that, we can move forward.
Can we vote on that with 2 members absent? Just logistically?
Yeah, we have a quorum.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what we don't have is a framework for how we're spending money, right? So if we're talking about, and I don't even know the cost to bring her in, but we had thinking about Race Thursday, which was free, and it was just the community engagement group that was there. So it's a little difficult for me to swallow how it is that we would spend any number with a comma in it when we're not engaged in our own work across working group.
If I may jump in, just to correct the record, the first thinking about Race Thursday, I did attend.
Yes, you did.
Virtually as a member of the research group. I did not attend the second one.
That's correct. Thank you.
I think, again, sorry, Tristan, you've been wanting to answer.
Sorry, my original comment was kind of about the date, but I think we're a little bit past that. Because I think we had said, I might have said in my email, I said a couple things, or I might have said it in person. Because I think the idea was that we would link up with Dickinson College, the law school, probably the Historical Society, and at that point, a week earlier, because I think you said it last Monday, we could have easily gotten that together, because events are technically actually more well attended a few weeks out. If you tell somebody, okay, this is happening in 2 months, they're like, great, they put it on their calendar and it comes, and then nobody shows up. So we found actually that shorter turnaround is better. At this point, I think it would be too soon. We lost that week. But I think that would be an event that if we got a couple of the bigger organizations in town involved in, we definitely could have a turnout. So I wouldn't be concerned with the speaker having that kind of turnout, because even just, Dickinson students hearing about it, that'll often boost numbers. So that kind of thing, if we're worried about that kind of thing, I think we can move past that with a speaker. But also, to my original point, I think at this point March might be too soon, just because if we book it this week, by the time we get everything together, we may lose President's Day also is next week, so that's one less day we'll have to potentially communicate with organizations in town. But I know we're kind of in this weird space of not even sure if we're doing the speaker, but that was my earlier note to just say to the group.
I guess I also don't know how bringing this particular speaker in helps us to achieve the items laid out in the working plan or the final product that we have to produce.
So I think that there, again, are multiple issues here. So one question is, should we, um, uh, again, how should we be spending money? We initially said we wanted money from the borough in part to have speakers. That's something that we said. So
I didn't say that, Raph.
well,
Like I didn't.
well,
So you're saying what we said? Like that was not what we said. That's not the entirety of what we said. We said we would like to maybe have some money so that we could do all of these things that we are all talking about. So to relegate it to one specific need isn't fair.
it's very difficult to have the conversation if I say things that we said, and not only do you interrupt, but then you misrepresent what we said. Multiple people nodded.
Raph, I'm not misrepresenting.
Well,
I'm asking you to
here's the thing.
include the entire conversation.
So here's the thing. If we say that we've done something, multiple people are on board and saying, like, how do we start planning it? And then you say, we actually never said that. It's very odd that everyone else remembers doing it then, isn't it?
Raph, I'm looking at the minutes. I'm looking at the minutes that we have in our record that we approve at every meeting. That's what I'm basing what we have talked about on. I can't remember every word that is said every single time. I can't. But what I can do is go back to the record and look at the minutes.
I thought there was I thought we did not like a very particular budget, but I thought there was one that we had done because we had said 3 speakers at, I think it was about $1,000 each because we figured honorarium and hotel. There was something like that because I think we also included the expert, the original research expert, the sociologist that was potentially coming in. I think we included that in there also, and that was maybe in October.
And I think that had come from specifically your working group, if I remember correctly. Didn't the data analysis, I'm not getting the name right, but didn't that working group come back with the proposal for the budget?
Yes, this is precisely right. Yeah, so that wasn't we didn't yet break into research working groups. Instead, a smaller group was convened for the purpose of that. That included me, Tristan, and Tawanda, and that's where we got those numbers before.
So did we keep record of that?
This was said in the meeting. I don't keep the minutes. I mean, this small group of 3 people you were part of, I don't know what else to say.
And I don't remember, Raph. I hear what you're saying. I don't remember. This is why we have resources so that we can go back and check. I don't remember. I'm going back to check. That's all that I'm saying. And what I have here in front of me doesn't indicate that.
Can I jump in just a moment? And I remember some sort of budget talk. It actually goes back farther than October. I pulled up the email that I reported out to the borough manager on the motion by the commission to make a budget request for $30,000, and it says for a data analysis consultant, guest speakers, or facilitators, and other likely smaller costs, is what I passed on to the borough manager. So it was a mix of items. I do feel like there was at some point I saw some sort of specific line item budget. I don't recall.
And I don't disagree with that. What I disagree with is saying that we requested money for speakers. We requested money for all of these things, including speakers. That's my point.
What I then find hard to understand is then what is the objection? So we said we wanted money for these things. So suggesting that that we shouldn't spend money on these things seems strange.
I didn't say that.
So again, so what is the objection exactly?
The objection is, one, no one is able to obligate funds that we have not all decided on what was going to be used. That's one. Two, and also for an undetermined amount. So, lodging, airfare, honorarium, meal. I have no idea what that total is. It's probably more than $1,000. Okay? Which would be more than what Tristan recalls from the meeting of the three of us as an amount for one speaker. So those are my objections.
Good. And as I said, in January, I specifically asked whether we should book this speaker. Now, maybe that's not in the minutes, but the point of the matter is I wrote to the commission as a whole the very next day about this very issue. That's why I did it. I said, as I mentioned, as we talked about yesterday, I even have the mention of what because I was charged with booking a speaker. So I mentioned this. I mentioned this on January 20th. So I invited the speaker the very next day after our meeting on Tuesday, January 18th, because we had that conversation. They answered. I wrote back to the commission on the 20th. It took a very long time for the speaker to get back to us about when she was available because she has a very busy schedule. She got back to us on basically last week. And I put forward at that time. So I had already multiple times mentioned to the commission that so at any point it could have been mentioned, oh, actually, we didn't actually do this. No other commissioner had that impression. And so my thought is, that's unfortunate. We should probably have a formalized process for going forward. And I think that that's all fine and good. But taking the conversation as if we never said that does just seem to me just factually incorrect. It's just not true to other people's experience. To say that I have this experience, so it must be the right one, when 6 other people don't, I think is a little bit unfair.
Okay, so 2 of them are not here.
They were written to as well, and they responded on the email chain. So, but be that all as it may, as I said, we can't go back and we can't go back and change the past. What we can do is have a conversation now.
I don't have a record of it.
I understand. And as I said, we can't change the past. So what we can do is have a vote now, have a conversation now on the question. And if we do not agree that we should extend the invitation to the speaker, or we should take it back, that's fine. So I just think we should call the question.
Can I jump in just one more time here? And I think that's a good way to resolve it. But I think you'll need to answer some questions, and one may just be sort of procedurally. You all haven't been doing this, sort of government work in this way. So what I think you need to do, one is establish what the budget is for a speaker or the data analysis or whatever it may be, and you vote on a budget not to exceed a certain amount. That way you've allocated those funds for whatever that purpose is, and then that would enable, just going forward, when the whether it's the research working group or the community engagement working group is going out and seeking what they need to seek, they know, here's my budget, and here's what I can work on, and I can bring that back with specific recommendation for an individual if it's an individual speaker. So that's procedurally, I think that's how I'd go through that. Two, and I think some of this just popped into my mind when Tristan made a comment about boosting numbers. I think who you're boosting numbers from in the community is important, and whose lives are we trying to affect in this commission. So we need to, you're the decision makers here on how you spend this money, right? If I were in your seats, I'd be asking myself, what is the purpose of this speaker, or what is the purpose of this project that we want to fund? What is the goal? Is the goal just to have people show up, or is the goal to have people who live in the town and may be living in the town longer than, I think you specifically mentioned, college students? Not to beat up on college students, but most of them won't be here in a few years. Who do we want to show up? And two, I'm just kind of getting a little bit of the idea of what the speaker may be speaking on. Is a primary goal to engage the community about the truth and reconciliation, or is a primary goal to really help you do your work? And it's great if you can get two birds with one stone, but I think you need to sort of work through that and what's more important, because then the timeline and when you want to have that speaker come in may be adjusted based on what that is. And I also, Tristan, I agree with you that puts a lot of people, you put something on a calendar 2 months out, and it just sort of gets tossed to the side after a while. So the short timelines can be good, but it sounds like it's not going to line up in the shortest part of this timeline with this one speaker. But I think I would work through that analysis very deliberately, and make sure you know what you're trying to achieve, so that you're getting to your mission. And there are a couple of things that came up in this conversation I'll touch on later when I do my update, but that's it for now, until I feel like I need to jump in again.
If I could just also jump in and sort of pile on. And I think the research group membership will remember this was precisely the conversation that we had last time when I raised, and I was satisfied with the response because frankly I didn't have all the background on the whole speaker while we were having the speakers, but I believe that the question was answered to my satisfaction at that time, that we were looking for both to help the community and to help us, and we didn't have it. Clearly there were positives for both, and I didn't know the speaker very well in the background. But clearly what I've learned so far from the chamber is that our need for both for our report at the end, our recommendations to the borough, as well as the community, at large, is very similar to what the chamber is running into. Is there's just not enough education in terms of what we mean by these terms. How does one go about sustaining progress in the DEI area that we're discussing, which covers our goals of the TRC to some extent. So having someone with professional background, knowledge, application, has applied it in the past and the like, would be quite helpful. That's it for me. Thanks.
So at this point, I think, does it make sense to just call the question again, and then, not call the question, for someone to move for the question, then we'll have, if it's seconded, we'll have a discussion about it, and then kind of go from there. So I'll call for any motion to consider engaging this particular speaker.
I'll second that.
I was going to so move.
So moved and seconded. Okay, so discussion.
What's the amount?
Oh, good. So what I mentioned to her is reimbursing travel, lodging, food, and an honorarium of $1,000. So the travel part. This speaker is in a school that is south of Chicago, quite a bit south of Chicago. So I take it they're going to need to drive to Chicago. And then there are rather cheap direct flights to and from Chicago that, again, it will depend, of course, because airfare is variable. I just booked flights to Chicago for 2 weeks out that were $250 for the round trip ticket to Harrisburg. So I would think with that and the honorarium, a cost of not more than $2,000 for the speaker. That's what I would imagine.
I am really uncomfortable having a financial conversation with the other co-chair missing. And we haven't budgeted the money, but
To be honest, I would like to vote on this tonight because I would like to move forward with something on the commission. And I think this would be a good first step to have something on the books to say we have done it. And I think we had said, I was looking through my emails about 1900 because Raph, we had asked you, I think you were the only academic in the group, so we are like, is this $20? Is this 200? So I think you're actually right on the ball with what we had said. So I would just like to, like I said, move forward.
I'm kind of in a similar position, and with finance and budgeting not my forte, I definitely trust in your working group, and Raph, I'm trusting in the research you've done, certainly. So it sounds appropriate, and I think with the matter of urgency, like I would also be on board.
I would as well. I would ask, even though I understand and I completely agree, that estimate sounds good. If we could get that maybe itemized to some extent as an estimate written down for the record on how much things cost, it may save us some heartache later on. But I say we go forward with it. It sounds good to me.
Perhaps even just with the caveat that moving forward, we outline more of what Mayor Schultz has outlined procedurally.
Yeah. So I think there's to that very point. I think there still is a good question about when this should happen because of the comments of Mayor Schultz, and so, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. I think we should, if there's not further discussion, I think that we should call the question.
I think I'm chairing the meeting.
Oh, my apologies. You are. Sorry.
So we'll table this until we talk about funding. I'm ready for the community engagement group. Or is your report finished?
I'm going to get procedural on you. You have a motion and a second, although the motion should have been called for by the chair.
The motion should have been called by the chair.
It should have been.
So I'm chairing the meeting. Scratch the motion from the record. Is your report complete?
Yes, the report is complete.
Thank you. We're ready for community engagement.
So as Tawanda and Tristan were both in the community engagement subgroup, jump in if I've missed anything here. One question that came up in the full TRC meeting, we had asked about what kind of social media online presence might we consider, and we said we would take that as a working group and have a conversation. What came out of that, we said it would make sense not to cast a super wide net, but maybe just to have a Facebook presence. Even considering benchmarking from the Climate Action Committee, whom I understand has a strong Facebook presence and may be good for benchmarking purposes. We'd also talked about, would it make sense so I guess it's two-pronged because we'd want to get agreement on that first. Does everyone feel like that may be a viable option for us? Secondly, would we want to have a point person for something like that, even if everyone would have access, of course, but just somebody who we may tag to be the primary go-to for monitoring, publication, etc. It also came up in the meeting that Commissioner Werderbach, having a really strong and professional online presence, may be a good candidate for a point person. And I think I was supposed to reach out to you, Lou, and I forgot to do that, and so I'm bringing it up here. My bad. And don't feel any obligation. Your name was brought up. You're not being voluntold by any means. But if that's something that in which you may have an interest, that was that was the dialogue that our group had. Other notes, so we did hold Thinking About Race Thursday. Limited participation, but good dialogue, and just needing to then have prompt questions in a venue for our next Thinking About Race Thursday, which, do we know what date that is? That's something I don't have annotated that I'd like to.
Should be the second. I think it's March 10th.
March 10th.
Yep.
And I would throw out there, what we did this time was offer in advance a couple of questions we wanted our audience members to think about prior, and I think that helped a little bit with just generating dialogue. So if anyone has any suggestions and would, even if not in this meeting, share them via email or anything, would be great. The last two I can't speak on too much because Commissioner Wilbur has a good beat on both of those. But the Black Culture Fest was the big one. And having a table for that. The one thing I will say, so I think before the meeting we called out the date and time, but it is February 26th, I believe 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And most tables at this Black Culture Fest will be required to pay a fee. As we understand, it's mostly vendors. However, I believe, and this is again, I'm not positive, but I believe Commissioner Wilbur has secured a position for us in which we would serve as a volunteer capacity, and there would not be a required fee.
That's correct.
Okay. So with that in mind, too, do we consider, number one, participation there, then number two, making a donation as some sort, as a gesture of goodwill or gratitude? That's the high level summary. I took some more extensive notes, which are in the SharePoint, but members Malazzo or Stallworth, anything that I've missed that you would want to add on?
No, other than I did hear from Doreen. She had a family situation, was not able to join us tonight, regretfully. So please keep her in your prayers. The table is free. We would need to know who's able to share some time on that day. So do we have folks who are willing to cover that event on the 26th from 11 to 3?
I'm not able to, unfortunately.
I am not able to either. Neither am I able. Yes.
I will not be in town, so I'm not able to either.
Anybody else able? No.
In the possible instance that both Commissioners Callahan and Wilbur would be able to, would it be worth sending an email out even just tonight to see if we still could?
Yeah, do you want to send it out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything else in your report, in the community engagement report?
Nothing that I had, unless y'all can think of something that I may have missed.
Yeah, I don't think so. Thank you. Item C on the agenda is funding. So maybe let's figure out how much money we actually received from the budget. So there was an amount that we had talked about at our meeting, which was prior to the budget approval, prior to the passage. So is there a final amount that was line itemed for us?
30,000 was budgeted. Yes.
Okay. All right, so I think, clearly because of our earlier conversation, there's definitely a need for us to look at how we want to allocate that, and then also a process by which that happens. Um, in some conversation that I had with the borough manager, she indicated that she would likely be coming around to the different groups to be able to give an overview of what that sort of requisition process looks like. Um, and I haven't heard anything back on that yet. We do have the amount of, are we saying 2,000 or are we saying 3,000? Are we saying 2,500 for Colleen Murphy?
Well, the question we were going to vote on was no more than 2,000.
Okay. So no more than 2,000. 2,000 would be the top. Okay. So are there folks who are interested? Actually, you know what? I want to table that, how to request funds, and allow me to have a conversation with Co-Chair Callahan about that, on how the remaining 28,000 would be budgeted. So for Colleen Murphy, is there a motion to engage her at the no more than $2,000 amount and allow RAF to work with scheduling and planning and arrangements and logistics?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Let the record reflect I'm in opposition, please. Thank you. Item D on the agenda, under new business, I did have a conversation with Dr. Marcellus Taylor from the Partnership for Better Health, and is one of the community engagement efforts looking at how to get all of those who are doing the work of racial justice, social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and come together, if for nothing else, at least get everyone on everyone's calendar, right? So that we don't have popcorn dates going on. Is there a volunteer who would like to represent us in that way? So he hasn't scheduled a meeting. I'm guessing meetings might be monthly, bi-monthly, sharing ideas, topics, networking, etc. Is there someone who would like to do that?
I just have a question about what the commitment would be. So as of now, we're kind of like, we don't know what. So is it like the upper end is like twice a month? Is the kind of, do we kind of know what the shape of the commitment is?
No, I'm thinking probably your meetings would be monthly, or every other month, or quarterly. It's very new in its infancy. I'm just looking for someone to, when he gives me the information, that I don't have to be the holder of it, that I can push it out someplace else. And if we want to change up whoever that is at any time, I'm fine with that too.
The easiest thing maybe to send it to the Truth and Reconciliation email so we can see what it will be and what the commitment is before anybody, like.
Yeah, the only problem with that is I haven't been real successful in getting responses from doing that.
Well, at least we know it's all in one category though, because I don't want to say like I will do it and then it may be too much or not fit for my skills. That's the only thing I'm not sure of if I would be the fit for it, because I don't quite know what it is.
No problem. I'll go ahead and take care of that. Updates from Borough Council staff.
Okay, so where to start? Just a real quick update. The borough is currently internally exploring trainers for DEI. Department heads are currently doing online training through Hack, but we'll have an on-site training at some point in the future once we narrow down who that trainer will be. Trying to decide where do I want to end this with. Second, as you may have seen, that the Borough Council took action at our workshop this month on the retirement of the Borough Crest. sort of understanding what that crest was, where it came from. We had been talking about it as a seal. It's still down there. You may have noticed it's no longer up here on the dais. Still on these actually historic rugs that were manufactured at the Maslin Carpet factory back in the 1950s. One of these rugs was spent time in Carlisle, England, and was offered back to us when they were, I think, moving their administrative building and changing things around. So the crest itself is retired. It in fact had never been used as a seal for the borough. The seal just has Lady Justice on it and Borough of Carlisle around the circle. And so the crest, as any sort of, although it was never formally adopted by Borough Council, by the borough, it no longer has a role here at Borough Hall, and is being gradually removed from different areas of borough government. Third item, we will have to pass an ordinance. We have to pass a resolution to create this commission. We actually have to pass an ordinance to ratify that. Just a quirk in the home rule charter. So I heard a little bit of discussion earlier about the seeming shortness of the timeline at this point. I thought roughly having 18 months for your mission may have been short. If there are things like that we need to tweak, or things in the resolution that you feel may need to be tweaked, it would be a good idea to get that. Let's have that discussion at some point before we would pass that ordinance at Borough Council. And I'm happy to start that discussion now, especially if it's going to help you progress in your mission. But that's all we have from Borough at this point. You're welcome.
Any questions?
Yes. Yes. With respect to the mayor's last comment, with respect to the ordinance, it would have to be passed, and it's probably too lengthy of a discussion to have it all here. But in my conversations with the chamber, they too asked for routine engagement with the borough on the issues of the issue of DEI. I suspect that their engagement request would go beyond the 18 months. So if there is no TRC, I would suspect or recommend that there should be probably some mechanism whereby that engagement might continue on this particular issue with the chamber, because it's going to take them a while, a lot longer than the remaining time we have formally have in the TRC, to really get this so-called Tulsa model going and to generate those metrics and to curate that data and make progress on the business and economic side. So that's just one of and I mentioned this, as you know, when I was interviewed, that it did seem like a very short time frame, even the 18 months, and I was coming in later, to actually accomplish all that we seek to accomplish. So if the TRC would go, I think we should at least consider what would then be some sort of mechanism to continue the engagement along the lines that I mentioned.
Any other questions?
I do have one. When will this vote on an ordinance come about?
I don't have a timeline on that yet, so we should do it within the next couple of months, so by our April meeting.
So I think thank you for that report, and then we can follow up as far as folks that'll work around that resolution based on the experience
Sure. And I'm not sure. I wasn't sure whether to take Lou's comment as a comment or a question. But
More of a question, I guess.
okay. Because I just realized I didn't say anything in response to that. I wasn't ignoring.
No, that was all right because I didn't phrase it. I didn't phrase it like a question, Mr. Mayor. I apologize for that. It was sort of a stream of consciousness. But I guess my question would be: has any thought been given to what might replace the TRC once the ordinance or the TRC's mandate expires?
Sure. Part of the original resolution is for TRC to make a recommendation on what happens in the future, whether the commission would continue its work in some way, or whether something else would be created to continue some work. So I think there's an expectation that in some way, whether through implementation or sort of a continuing mission, that the commission's work would continue. Back to the connection between the borough and the chamber, I think is pretty strong. Michelle Crowley has my contact information, has the borough manager's contact information. We work with each other on numerous things. So I think if there's going to be collaboration there, that would pretty easily be done.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments for Borough Council or staff? We'll now open up the meeting for public comment. Community members are asked to give their name and address for the record and to keep their comments to 3 to 5 minutes. Seeing none here, Stephanie, do we have anybody in Zoom? Fantastic. So we have our meeting schedule. Our next meeting is scheduled for March 14th, same time, same bad channel right here, 6 p.m. Not 5 p.m. Anybody have anything else for the good of the order?
I do. Sorry. The reason why it would have been a good thing to have voted on the speaker thing earlier is so that we could talk about the dates. That's the thing that still hasn't been decided. But the thing is, I both have to go. Lots of people have to go. The availability of the others is not known, and one of the points of having the speaker is to educate the rest of the committee. So I don't know if it's an appropriate thing to have now. Is this something that we can do over email to talk about when such a speaker will be scheduled?
That was the spirit behind behind the conclusion of that motion, was that you would handle the logistics.
Okay, is that the understanding? I just want to make sure that's the understanding.
Meeting adjourned.